Welcome to Southern Sense Talk on Rumble. You are going to love Annie the Radio Chickadee Ubelis and her co-host, C.S. Bennett. You'll find them live here on Fridays from 2:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Date Time. Check out their website at Southern Sense, as in commonsense.net. It's that easy, southernsense.net. So sit back and relax. They're informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey.
Do we have Hannah back on? Do we have sound now?
I think so.
We have sound. Yes, we have sound. Houston, we have liftoff.
Here we have it.
You can't make this up, folks. This is what happens. What happens live. Oh wow! But you can find us, like I was saying earlier. We are now officially back up on YouTube as Southern_Sense. Our old name, it's back up. So you can find us then. We can start now building back our viewership on YouTube. So please go to there and subscribe to help us. We got only about 20 people, but that's only the last 2 days. So hopefully we'll get more as people watch and listen. We have two great guests. It's a mother and son team. It's the Sorbo family. You know Kevin Sorbo from the TV series Hercules and several other movies and TVs he's done. But this is his wife, Sam, who's an actress and an author in her own right, and a homeschooling expertise. And her son, Braeden. Braeden himself is an actor in his own right, and he's got 2 books out. Not one, but 2. I mean, this is a family affair with these guys. And so we're going to have the 2 of them on, Braeden and Sam, together at the start of the show. And oh man, things are going crazy. The riots that were going on in Manhattan just on Wednesday. Oh, geez. It's getting crazier and crazier. It's like something's gotten into the water, I think.
Yeah. I think people are up in arms about the Trump administration actually pulling through with what they said they would do, what he ran on, what he's done since day one in office. And I don't think people know how to react to it. You know, I mean, of course, there's certain people on the right side of the aisle who agree, but there's a lot of people who are upset. There's a lot of sanctuary jurisdictions that don't know what to do with their policies. Some of them are doubling down. It seems like every other day there's something really insane in the news that's centric on immigration, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
We also had that congressman from Delaware that recently, this past week, went down there, Congressman Ivey, I believe his name is, and he's demanding the El Salvadorian government cede to his demands. He's a U.S. citizen on foreign soil telling the government of El Salvador what they should be doing for him, demanding another government behave as if he was president of that country.
Yeah, there's a sense of entitlement there. I'm assuming you're talking about Kilmore Abrego, the man.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because in the same state where he was illegally residing in Maryland, you've got senators and representatives flying down there and talking to him and touting that they're going to bring him back and whatnot. But it's the same state where multiple women have died just going on jogs, killed by criminal illegal aliens, and none of those same politicians have reached out to their mothers at all. So there's a huge discrepancy here. And I don't think it's a right versus left issue anymore. I think people just need to, understand the rule of the law and have some a sense of humanity for people who have lost their lives to open borders rather than going down there and demanding they have due process, which they're not entitled to. And it's wild. Yeah, that's something that keeps popping up. The Delaware representative going down there and arguing his piece was just the icing on the case to that story. I mean, he was deported, and rightfully so. I mean, he was here illegally. That's one thing. He's got a violent criminal background. I mean, it's not like this guy was a family man or some kind of good guy,
Well, you also have members of the squad in Congress that are going over to ICE facilities, ICE detention facilities, and demanding to be let in to inspect them. Mm-hmm. But these ICE facilities are the most highly inspected and regulated facilities. you would see worse conditions. Oh, what was that state that they had? Was that Maryland that they had to actually close some of the facilities down? I know it was one of those liberal states that they had the most horrific conditions for just regular criminals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it may have been Maryland. I think going back to the fact that politicians are demanding to knock down the doors of ICE facilities, I mean, it's just painfully ironic. I mean, these people, they don't read federal immigration law. They don't honor ICE detainers, but they want ICE to honor you entering into their facility. I mean, it makes no sense. None at all.
Wait, we want to give special treatment to these illegal aliens. They committed a crime to come into the country, demanding special treatment and getting Medicaid and food stamps and Section 8 housing and you name it, and Social Security benefits that most people fight years to obtain after they've paid into the system legally. But yet you had the January 6ers sitting behind bars. Jake Lang is a perfect example. Never saw the inside of a courtroom, never went before a judge, never had the charges formally read to him in a court of law, never had his day in court for 4 years and 6 days.
Yeah.
Was shuttled from facility to facility to facility. J6s that were refused cancer treatments. They were placed in solitary confinement for doing nothing more than singing the American anthem.
Yeah, there's a big discrepancy in how people view the rule of law and how people enforce law. And you would think that under the previous administration and the current left-leaning individuals in Congress and right now, that they would at least be a little bit more subtle when they choose to blatantly ignore one set of federal law and then blatantly abuse another set. So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
And I'm looking at the videotape of what was going on in Manhattan on Wednesday. And it was a handful of people that were making a lot of noise. And, God bless my guys in blue. They handled it with professionalism and skill. But one of the people that was leading this rally was a Baptist minister. You think being a man of God, you would seek a nonviolent manner in which to plead your case.
And this was revolving around immigration, right?
Yes.
What's going on up there? Yeah, and it's funny, Annie, because I mean the sanctuary movement began in the late 70s and morphed in the 80s because of religious institutions. That's why it's called sanctuary. So it began in the church and then it was co-opted and abused and expanded, and now it undermines federal law and threatens national security. It threatens local security, as you can see there in Manhattan. So there's an interesting history behind it, but I think some people, religious or not, can twist the words of the Bible and they use it to support their open border ideology, humanitarian approach, I guess you could say.
Well, when this was happening in the 80s, that was when I was a police officer in Brooklyn, and we got a call to a Roman Catholic church. I was born and raised Roman Catholic, great admiration for the church up until a point when I started to see things happening. And we get the call to this Catholic church for a burglary. And, you had the staff there on hand, and they're trying to explain to us that this safe was broken into. So what was in the safe? No sooner did we realize what was in the safe, then the priest came in and said, no, we're not going to file a complaint. No, nothing was stolen. Nothing's missing. No, go away. It was green cards. Uh-huh. They were filling out green cards in the back office of the rectory.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's legal.
It's not.
But,
No.
The idea was that if individual felt for some reason they were being persecuted, they could seek sanctuary within a religious church. Yeah. They can go knock on the doors, especially the Catholic Church. We seek sanctuary. We're being persecuted. They're murdering the people in my native country. I need to come here, and I need you to help me facilitate becoming a citizen here or migrating here, whatever. That was understood. But then, as you said, it changed somewhere in the late 70s, early 80s. And I think it really came to a head when we started doing this show 15 years ago, where it was the, what do they call it? Brain fart. The non-governmental agencies, the NGOs.
NGOs, yeah.
NGOs came into full fruition. And then you were seeing that these churches were raking in anywhere from $10,000 to $40,000 per body to process them, and then to gain them the benefits they needed or didn't need really, but the benefits they're giving to them courtesy of the taxpayer dollar. Meanwhile, we have veterans sleeping homeless in the streets, and it has really gotten out of hand. And it's the handout is like, give me, give me, give me. I deserve it. Why? You entered here illegally. If we were to do that in Mexico or any other country, we'd be thrown behind bars. If we were to demand a job in Mexico, no, they'd say, go back home. You try to do that in China or Russia or anywhere else, it's illegal there, it's illegal here.
Yeah, I agree. You know, when churches started getting involved in the social political movements of any type, including immigration, it's not a good sign. And I do think that, you know, the genesis of the sanctuary movement was probably rooted in something that people could argue was good for refugees or whatever. And now it's, like I said earlier, it's been co-opted. And you're right. A lot of churches are affiliated with NGOs. Most NGOs are Lutheran, Jewish, or Catholic. And they receive FEMA-backed taxpayer federal funds to essentially aid and abet in the harboring and smuggling of illegal aliens. And they tout off that it's for good, that, you know, these are refugees or these are asylees or whatnot. And then with the previous administration, it exacerbated a pre-existing issue. You know, the churches were dealing with these people who came in under some form of a visa, under some form of a status, most likely legally. And then the Biden administration went and created all these legal pathways, expanding parole, expanding asylum, to entire nationalities. And that's when these NGOs really needed the federal funding, because they had too many people. They couldn't handle it. And they started to proliferate across the nation. And it's interesting. I've seen a couple maps of how many NGOs there are. And coincidentally enough, they're almost always along the borders, you know, and it only got worse. And right now, I assume they don't have much to do. The NGOs, so.
No, they don't. But just before we bring our next guest on, just to let people that are watching and listening, my guest co-host is Hannah Davis with fairus.org. Curtis had to take the day off. Shame on him. But we love Hannah. Always love having her on here. But I got to play this just before we bring our next guest on. Here we go.
Hi there, Sam Sorbo here.
Kevin Sorbo here. And we got a Father's Day bundle on Sorbo Studios. Check it out. One of my latest movies out last Christmas, God's Here. Wonderful family movie. Dads, make some popcorn. And one of my favorite movies I was blessed to direct, Miracle in East Texas, in theaters about a year and a half ago, right?
Yes.
Great movie.
And it comes with a set of pens,
Yes, it does.
which have great uplifting messages on them. Be courageous and don't be discouraged. And also 101 blessings. Boy, the light's in here. These are 101 powerful scripture verses to strengthen and empower men in their faith. These are cards.
And my son's second book just came out, Embrace Masculinity. It's about lifting men up in a world that pushes them down. We know what we're talking about, dads. Great read.
Get this for the man in your life.
God bless. Happy Father's Day.
All right. With that said, I welcome Braeden and Sam Sorbo, mother and son team. And I could not resist this. I came across that and I said, I've got to do that. Father's Day is just a little over 2 weeks away. And I figured it was one heck of a way to plug the books.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Braeden, you are an amazing young man. You're just 24 years old. And holy cow, what you have been able to accomplish. But then again, by the time I was 24, I had a business and I was married.
I'm not almost 24. I'm a few months away. I'm not quite there yet. So I still have time to catch up.
Okay. But you've got a new book out, which is great. It's called Embrace Masculinity, Lifting Men Up in a World That Pushes Them Down. And I've been reading some of your work and some of your articles. And this is something I was discussing. I do another show called Moms Across America on Wednesday through Dan Perkins Media. And this is one of the things we got into about how our society has become so toxic that the idea of just being a masculine man is wrong. How dangerous that is. Oh my goodness. You are right-wing nuts. I mean, ultra MAGA, whatever you want to call them. But funny thing is that women don't want men that are not masculine.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And that's what we see time and time again. You know, you have all these people online shaming men for following their natural tendencies, the ideas of leadership, protection, provision, and the women are shaming them while at the same time complaining that there aren't any good men. And it's kind of this weird conundrum that we find ourselves in, where when you push people away for so long, it becomes very hard to win them back, which is exactly what the left is now trying to do. I don't know if you've seen, they're starting covering this $20 million plan called the SAM plan, which is Save the American Man, or Speak to the American Man, not my mom's
I
man.
resent the name of it, by the way. I resent it.
Yeah, and they're trying to reach young men, and they're saying, well, young men are actually overwhelmingly pro-choice, pro-gay pornography, and pro all these things. And all of the guys that I know, and all the people my age, are going, what? We just want to be able to afford a house. We just want to be able to buy groceries. What is going on?
It's amazing because I grew up with a strong family, and we grew up to respect the family unit, respect life. As I'm saying, I was raised strong Roman Catholic, but I saw things in the church that caused me to go a different direction. And I'm glad I did, because I felt the spirituality in my new church. And this is something that people are also, you know, how dare you be masculine? How dare you be faithful? How dare you be pro-life? How dare you want to have kids learn the basic traditional education and not this new religion they're teaching of wokeness? I mean, Sam, this is something that you've been talking about. You've been on our show before, and I think this was about the time you just started delving really deep into homeschooling, and it was pre-COVID. Matter of fact, it happened to have been 2017, if I remember correctly, because your husband had just come out with that movie, Let There Be, was it Let There Be Light? You were in that movie, Braeden.
I was, yes.
Weren't you?
Let there be light.
Yes, you were. I didn't realize that at the time. But in 2017, after I had you and Kevin on, I had Nick Searcy on at the same time also. Shortly after that, I had suffered too many strokes. And then someone turned around to me and said, oh, by the way, did you know Kevin had suffered? And I said, no. But, you know, it's because of the ability to be strong physically and mentally, I believe, is what helped your husband through it. And it helped me. I still have some residuals. I forget words and I'll forget names. And Hannah knows I'll struggle sometimes going, worry, what's that word I'm looking for? But, you know, it's something to do with being physically strong and mentally strong that they don't seem to want us to be.
They don't. You've hit the nail on the head. That's really the pinnacle point, okay, that sums up all of these different attacks. So there's an attack on the family. The families are destroyed by school. When parents submit their children as young as age 4 into the school system, it's the decimation of the family. It is the breaking of the parent-child bond. It is the undermining of parental authority in the house. It's also just the physical and time separation of the child from the parents. And so, you know, if you are starting out a relationship and the person that you're interested in moves to a foreign country, you know that the relationship kind of is doomed. Like, you're not going to get very far if you don't have an opportunity to see each other on a regular basis. Now, today, with, you know, social media and the ability, FaceTime and all of that, if you're an adult, you know how to manage that, but children don't know how to manage that. So you remove them from the home, and the home is less meaningful to them. And the school becomes their family. And that was the transmission belt for all of these other ideologies to enter into the equation. And now we're fighting all these other ideologies because we basically invited them into our culture, and they have now taken over, sadly. So you have one political party in the United States, like Braeden mentioned, that can't define a woman and doesn't know what a real man is.
Well, Braeden, you were homeschooled, and one of the things I hear people on the left say is, well, if they're homeschooled, they don't interact with other kids. Well, the kids that are in the schools already are not interacting with each other because they got their faces buried in their smart device. But, you didn't suffer any for it. You've got friends, people that you can physically interact with, and it's not, who's the next like on Facebook or TikTok or whatever.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, especially being, a homeschool graduate from second grade all the way through high school, talking to people. It feels like I have to defend the fact that I have friends and a social life. When I tell people that I'm homeschooled, they go, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And I go, "Well, I'm probably better off than you." But that's up for debate. And so, yes, I have a wonderful friend group. Yes, I have people in my life that I see on a frequent basis, and I socialize significantly better than a lot of peers my age. I mean, there are studies that show that 45% of 18 to 24-year-old men have not approached a woman in real life. So you talk about a lack of socialization. People are too afraid to strike up a conversation with someone of the opposite sex because of how invasive social media is to someone's privacy. So they're now afraid of opening a conversation for fear of societal repercussions.
But Anne, consider that this is an argument for school. The idea that children are socialized in school. Well, show me the class. Show me the socialization class. Because my understanding is you believe in school because you think that school educates. And so you're telling me that you believe that school socializes the child, in other words, educates the child in social behavior without a class? So then how can you even support school at all at being effective at educating the child in any manner when you yourself believe that socialization happens by osmosis, simply by inserting child in group of other children, which, by the way, is not at all resembling of real life in any case, but they are undermining their own arguments by insinuating that some sort of education happens without regard to the classroom. And so the whole thing is absurd. It's also absurd that they would take socialization to justify the fact that even though the schools are failing to educate, there's some good in the schools. That's also a joke. And so what I want people to understand, and why I wrote my book, Parents' Guide to Homeschool, is because I want parents to understand schools fail to educate. They haven't educated for quite a while, actually. It's been decades. And so we need to rethink what we think about education, because we went to school and they trained us to think that they were educating us when they weren't. And when you do that, it sets you free from the system, and you're free to then raise your children and have a family, and you will be set apart, yes, but you will be much better off.
And I think you guys both make really good points. I mean, I was homeschooled as well. So it's kind of interesting that you guys are on here today.
Oh, you're such a baby.
class of 2014. But that was one of the things, even back in the day, what I was told, I'd meet someone who, as my father would call, government schooled. And they would say, well, when are you getting to meet anybody? And it's just funny that argument continues to stay everything that I've ever noticed about a public school system is that you're supposed to stand in line. You're supposed to be quiet. You're supposed to raise your hand, speak when spoken to. I don't understand where or when the kids have time to actually socialize. There was a small part of my time where I was public schooled, and they didn't even let us talk at lunch. So, I just don't understand that argument at all.
Right. The reason that we believe that children are effectively socialized in school is because it's the only opportunity they're ever given. And so they make friends haphazardly, and sometimes it works out really well, and sometimes they become the bullied child, and there's no telling how it's going to work out for your child. But for some reason, we just describe the schools socialize children effectively and very well, and all that. The schools have a big bullying problem. Mm-hmm. And we just sort of skip over that. Like, I want my child to be socialized, so I'm just going to send them to school. It's kind of silly. But congratulations that you were homeschooled. That's awesome.
And back to your point about what you said about how it's not a true reflection of adult life. It's not. In work, in college, in your friend groups, even as an adult, you're not surrounded by people that are within the same 10-month age range as you. So it's not accurate at all. So no, I definitely agree with your points for sure.
In fact, I'll go a little bit farther and tell people, I know this comes as a big shock, but children are unique. They're not one size fits all. And so I had one child who would have done very, very well socially in school, and two children who were introverts. And one of my children, if I'd sent her to school, she probably would be cutting, would be goth, would be super acting out, because she can't stand to be around people for that long every day.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have the ability to be homeschooled. Both my parents worked full time. So I went through public school. My mother would not send us to Catholic school, religious school, because she went through it. So she goes, no, I'm not going to put my kids through it. So we went to public school, and I was one of those kids, because the smallest in the class, that was bullied, until I turned around and figured out I got to stand up on my own 2 feet. And after that, no one messed with me. Right. But this is where the public schools fail, because when I went to complain about the bullying, it's like, oh yeah, well, we'll sit you all down and have a conversation. That doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. And the public schools fail in so many areas, because I was there at the start of when they started teaching health. They called it what they called it? It was health ed at the time. And as a kid, I understood that the door was being propped open. As a kid, I understood the danger of what they were starting to do. And sure enough, now we have generations later, we're having them teach overtly sexual things in the classroom. The original idea was to teach you about the human body, diseases and the function of certain organs and things like that. But it morphed. It morphed into this monster. I don't know.
I'm just going to push back just a little bit, Anne. I know we want to think well of them and think that the initial intention was not to whatever, but they're a bunch of perverts. And I don't know that, it was written by Kinsey, and Kinsey performed experiments on infants to find out how they climaxed and how many climaxes they could achieve sexually, etc. And so when you start at that point, I don't know that it wasn't a perversion from the beginning, and they cloaked it in this sort of responsible health advice kind of thing. But they promised us that this would limit teenage pregnancies. And immediately upon implementing sex ed or health class, teenage pregnancies skyrocketed, and no one did anything. And this is my struggle, is we constantly implement new things first without even testing them to know that they might be effective. We're just on a whim and on a prayer. We fund it, we implement it, and then we never look at the results. And I'm done with that. I want people to know they have every right to take their child out of school. And I also want to point out that while you say you didn't have the ability to be homeschooled, and you seem to credit the fact that both parents worked, I know 2 working parent families who homeschool their children. I did it and worked at the same time for my children. And these days it is easier than ever to home educate your child while you hold a full-time job. I know single moms who have done it all the way through and never gave up working full-time, because it is not a full-time job to educate a child. It is, in a sense, a full-time job to parent a child.
Exactly. And I was lucky to have a very strong father and mother team, but they were dealing with what they were dealing with in my generation. I got to say, I was one of the last classes to graduate where we all met our grade. I think it was 82 was the last year, and I was a little bit before that. So
what does that mean, met your grade?
You met your reading level, your math level.
Oh yeah, that's long gone. But they dumbed down the curriculum. I'm sorry to say, they dumbed down the curriculum for us as well. And so it's been degrading since the turn of the century. Since school started, they've dumbed down the curriculum. And I just want to point out so that people understand, education is the only business where they will shift the goal posts to meet what they attained. And so they never meet their goals. They just change the goals to match what they actually, attained. In San Francisco, there's a brand new story out that they've decided in San Francisco, because of diversity, equity, and inclusion, 26% will be a passing score.
Oh, geez.
Because, Black kids or something. So 26%. In the state of New Jersey, teachers don't have to pass accreditation exams anymore.
Exactly. That I know. It's also where they don't want the parent involved in the school at all. Fortunately, we've changed our school board here, and we're getting now more traditional education. We're getting also businesses working in conjunction with the school district to get kids that are trained, that can be employable out there. It took us a couple of school boards and a couple of school superintendents, but we changed it. And that's why I always tell everyone, politics starts local. And you got to know what's going on in the schools. I encourage people to go to the schools themselves and open up the textbooks and look at what is in the textbook that they're teaching the kid. A perfect example of the schools turning around and telling the parents to butt out. I don't know if you heard about this one in Carlsbad, California, where they had a BDSM expert to talk to the kids about the LGBTQ community and something called the Gender Sexuality Alliance on an Ally Week. Supposed to be dealing with anti-bullying. Now, I had no idea. This is how dumb I am. What the heck was BDSM?
Oh, dear.
And I found out it stood for bondage, discipline, sadism, and masochism. I'm going, what the heck are you doing teaching these kids this? What does this guy have to do with education? And all as you said, it is sickness. It is a perversion. And the parents were trying to stop it. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking to myself, you're looking at it the wrong way. Instead of trying to get the school district to stop it, get your kid out of the school.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying is school is tantamount to child abuse. But I'll make it even simpler for parents. Children are born naturally curious. When they go to school, they learn to sit down and shut up. They learn that they have to ask permission to ask a question. So even before they're allowed to learn, they first have to ask permission, which means that they have to draw attention to themselves. That right there, that is anti-education. It's not neutral. It's actually a statement against the education of the child. So you have to understand that from the get-go, they do not want the child to be educated. And you can argue that, well, maybe that's just haphazard. Maybe that's not like the intention isn't there. I don't care. I don't care if they intend or they don't intend. The paradigm is against the child learning. And so why would you even trifle with whether or not BDSM, whether or not I can withdraw my child? There's a court case at the Supreme level right now in Maryland, where parents are saying, I want to be able to withdraw my child from that kind of indoctrination, the LGBTQ indoctrination. And the school is saying, no, it's, you know what, there are too many parents that want to withdraw and we can't accommodate them logistically.
You wonder why. You wonder why. Well,
and you go, well, maybe if all the parents don't want their children in it, maybe you should just shut down the damn class. But they're not interested in that. They're ideologues. They're religious zealots. School is the new religion. And if you're not a believer, then you will be apostate. You will be, sent from the church. And that's what they're doing to parents now.
And then,
well, you are. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say that.
Go ahead.
You argue in an article you wrote, as well as in your book, that they don't want you to be strong, because then you think for yourself, and you can discern for yourself your own morals, your own ethics, your own values, and you can stand up to them and say, no, this is wrong. I'm not going to accept this. But that's what they don't want. They don't want someone strong like you or your mom or like Hannah or myself. They don't want us to be strong and be defiant. They want us to be compliant.
Yeah, they want submission. And so the easiest way to do that is to beat it into people at a very young age, and specifically the young men, because people know that young men physically pose a threat against a leadership of bad people. And so their ultimate goal is the destruction of the young man, because they know that as long as they can keep a group or a large portion of us down, that they will be able to maintain control. It will be significantly harder for people to fight back, because if you don't have an army, then you pose no physical threat. And so that has been sort of the precursor to all of this. I'll throw in a history reference. A lot of people don't realize that what's happening right now happened already a long time ago in what is now known as the Weimar Republic, where Berlin, Germany was the sin capital of Europe. They had people performing experiments on Magnus Hirschfeld, had the first ever transgender clinic. And this was pushed towards the masses by and large by groups of people. They wanted this indoctrination, and it led to wars. It led to tons of it. It was a terrible, terrible time in the history of the world.
You're saying there was a transgender LGBT pride movement in Berlin.
Yes.
Yes.
And it led to wars, it led to famine, it led to destruction, it led to death. And unfortunately, that is the path that we are currently going down, where something is going to happen where we might not have full control over it. And that is, I don't want anybody to be suffering. I don't want anybody to be in pain. There are videos of people online who are getting their double mastectomies or their hysterectomy. Is that the other one? And they're looking at themselves in the mirror and they're breaking down in tears. And you look with that person and you go, that is just absolutely awful. And I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. And the reason that they do this, like I said, is because they don't want people to be able to fight back. They want you to be complacent, to be submissive, to be easily controlled opposition. And
I'll tell you, if you're addicted to drugs, if you're addicted to hormone replacement therapy, or you're addicted to whatever the medical treatment is for transgender or even changing back, right? You're very weak. You're in a weakened position.
Well, even more so, because that's still a fraction of the population. There's studies that are saying 1 out of every 27 people in Gen Z will identify as transgender. Whether or not they follow through with some sort of hormonal replacement or surgery is really still to be seen. But there is currently some studies out that are saying 80 to 85% of men admit to watching porn, or have admitted to watching porn, with almost at that same number admitting to watching on a monthly and or even weekly basis. And I just put a post up today and it said, you know, masturbation to watching someone else have sex with someone else is just about the gayest thing you can do. It is the weakest thing you can do, because you are psychologically conditioning your own body and brain as a man to watch other men dominate women. And what that does is it makes you complacent, because it kills you spiritually and mentally. And so when you don't have a spiritual or mental life because of that, you become physically absent and therefore pose zero threat until you can rewire your brain, which is an incredibly difficult process that many men are unwilling to undergo. And so they have become rendered themselves as useless in this society.
They're addicted.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
You know, what I found interesting in reading one of your articles about, you know, men working out and why it's beneficial mentally and physically. The one question I had was, why didn't you include women also? Because women, when we work out, also we're achieving the same basic things, but people don't like to see women as being strong. And Sam, you probably had the same thing, constantly being told, "Oh, you're headstrong. You are really headstrong."
No, nobody would say that to me. They know better.
Yeah. So the reason that I made the article specifically about men was because a lot of the online content directed towards men working out doesn't include women. And so there's a very clear overt attack on masculinity and the gym lifestyle fitness that a lot of men specifically go through, whereas women don't necessarily get that same pushback unless it is from men who say, "Oh, well, you're too muscular, you're headstrong," things like that. But the article was really geared towards the fact that the men are refusing to stand up. And a reason for that is because they're not working out. And so trying to bring young men back to the gym, which Generation Z is doing a very good job of doing. I mean, we're talking about a return to religion. The Diocese of Los Angeles saw a 34% uptick in converts to the faith this past Easter 2025. And then in 2024, they had another 20 to 30% uptick. So you have young men, and these are specifically young men who are converting, who are returning to these traditional roots of religion, as opposed to this kind of networked spirituality that is pushed upon the masses, as so many people just sort of accept as this kind of faux augmentation of what we really know to be true. And so the article and the purpose of the book is to tell people, just in general, not specifically men or women, but that their inherent virtues that they have, the values that they hold to, the tradition that has been instilled in them from the moment of their conception is good and should be exemplified and uplifted, as opposed to oppressed.
Yeah, Braeden, I really like the article you actually had put out. I think it was either in the last page or the last paragraph. You said if gyms are right wing, no, if exercising is right wing, then we just need more gyms. I thought that was pretty punchy. I thought that was a good way to end it. So you're a good author for sure.
Well, thank you.
Love it.
Oh man.
I will say that I think Braden's point is that typically the men are the ones who are the fighters. And so that's why they are being targeted. I don't think that we see women being targeted at the same level. And I think that's what Braden's point is. And he makes a really good point. In fact, he told me something the other day that I just found kind of, it shocked me for a minute. It makes perfect sense, but I'd never really thought of it that way. But if you aren't strong, you don't have an opinion. You can pretend to have an opinion, but if you can't defend your opinion physically, you don't really have an opinion.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I've been called a lot of things because I have an opinion, and wow.
Yeah.
But
you have to learn.
If it's a man, I can get away with it, and they say, "Oh, she's crazy." But if a man does it, oh man, you're pushing. I just ease up.
Yeah.
But that's not what we need.
No, exactly. We need men to lay the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal, all the way to the floor. And so the purpose of the differences between men and women are best realized in this sense, right? I like to use the analogy that men are a Tomahawk missile and women are the guidance system. They're the tracking system that keeps them on point. And so it's like both people have a unique purpose. And when they realize that, everything is better. Life is better. And so for young men, they need to hone in their skills. They need to learn how to become the rage-filled barbarian that they're supposed to be. And the young women are the directors, are the guidance. And so that is a beautiful thing. And a lot of people like to quote, a lot of people who dislike that idea quote Ephesians 5:22, which says, "Oh, women submit to your husbands." And they go, "Well, see, this Christian idea that you have is all about submission, and women are worse than the husbands, and the husbands are better and oppressors and all this stuff." But they fail to quote the rest of the chapter. Verses 23 through 25, Paul writes, he goes, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, sacrificing himself and laying his life down for her." And so when we realize that a man's job is purely sacrificial in nature, right? The missile doesn't come home. It blows up. It does its job. The barbarian might not come back from war. He goes and he fights, laying down his life for his homeland. That is the beauty, and that is what they hate so much about Christianity. That is why they don't attack other religions. No religion is persecuted like Christianity is persecuted, because Christianity is true.
Well, yeah. Now we also see they're going not just after us. Now they're going after the Jewish faith also, because we're based upon the Jewish faith, the monolithic faith that was handed down to us. But Sam, you have it where you have now helping with homeschooling. You have your own, I'm trying to find the right word. You have your own set of books and curriculum to help people homeschool their kids. Tell us more about that, because you have a new book out that I came across, and I forgot where I put the name of it.
I have it right here.
Our Parents' Guide to Homeschooling, Making Education Easy and Fun.
Conveniently right here. Parents' Guide to Homeschool. This is actually a curriculum for the parents. And the idea is, once you read through this and you answer some of the questions that are in here, you'll have a better idea about what you're looking for in terms of the education of your children. And so a lot of times we think the school tells us that the education is so that the kid can get a good job. Well, is that the highest goal that you have for your child? You really ought to think about that, because you can aim much higher than, I want my kid to get a good job. You can aim towards, I want to have a lifelong relationship with my child. I want to have a lifelong relationship with my grandchildren. I want my children to be successful, but I also want them to be caring people and giving people and forgiving people. And like, there's a whole bunch else that goes into that the school never addresses, never even attempts to address. In fact, hides from us, obfuscates from the parents, and tells the parents, butt out, we're taking care of it all. And they take care of maybe 1/10, if that, of the upbringing, of the education of a child. And so my book is intended to set parents free. I call it an emancipation project, to set people free from the enslavement of the schools. And the reason I say that we are enslaved to the schools is because so many parents say to me, oh, I could never homeschool my child. But did you graduate high school? Yes. But you feel incapable to teach a second grader? Maybe that says more about you than it does about the school. Like, you got to think about that. You're still willing to send that second grader that you love with all your heart into the system that turned out the likes of you. So that's the whole, that's it in a nutshell. I've got some other books on the website, also sorbostudios.com. I invite everybody to go take a look. sorbostudios.com. There's a number of books there. And we also do events, and I speak across the nation. Next week, Braeden and I are speaking at the National Association for Christian Legislators, which will be very interesting. It's the largest group gathering that they've had so far. And so we'll be there at Liberty University. We're excited about that.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Because a friend of mine runs Hill Faith, Mark Tapscott. So he might be there. It's very possible.
Very good.
Very possible. But what we're seeing now in the education system, which what I love about what you do, is you teach people how to live their lives, not just educate on the ABCs, but how to live their lives. There's a recent article, I think it was up on Newsmax yesterday, that people in Canada are asking to be taught how to do their laundry, how to make something else besides boiling some water for ramen noodles. The very basic ABCs to survive day to day, how to balance a checkbook, things like that. We used to graduate high school and you didn't have to think about those things. But today, these kids, and these aren't things that should be taught in school, they should be taught in the house, in the family.
Right. To clarify, it was an article about college kids writing home. And I can't remember, it's in a book actually, about college kids writing home and saying, how do you get chicken bouillon? Does the chicken, where does the chicken spit out the bouillon or things like that? They're seriously, like, they don't understand how the world works because they've been sequestered in an institution, which I refuse to call an education system, but it is an institution. We are the only culture in the world that institutionalizes healthy children. And you've got these kids who can't. We have a new term. Okay, one of my books is Words for Warriors, because I wanted to codify the actual definitions of words before we got too far out over our skis with redefining our words. We have a new word called adulting, because young people don't know how to be adults. They've gone all through the system, but they haven't been parented to become adults. They've been schooled to remain children, which, what does that do? Well, that serves a government, that serves a socialist government. So it's not, I'm not saying it's unintentional. I'm saying it's a little bit by design. And in fact, now we have the whole school choice movement, because let's face it, homeschoolers score 25% better on standardized tests. Those are their tests. Okay. And homeschooled students score better. And in the minority communities, they score up to 42% better. Plus, their test scores are completely unrelated to the education level of their parents. And this is what I want to pound into people's brains. The education of the child has very little to do with the teacher. It is all about the child being allowed to teach himself, being shown how to teach himself, and then being allowed to flourish in that capacity. But the schools rob him of that because they train him to believe that he needs an expert. They train him to believe that the teacher has all the knowledge, and that's who he's going to go and deal with from now on. And so now we're raising all of these children to be dependent on some form of an expert. Somebody show me how to do the thing. And that's why you've got all these kids in college going, but how do I cook the ramen noodles? Do I need a stove, or what goes in it? They don't know. And I mean, this is a tragedy. It's not just a failure of the schools to teach reading and writing. I mean, it is, but it's the overall failure of the school. And basically, they've never said that they would do this. It was implied, but it was never stated that they would actually turn out, accomplished individuals, accomplished adults, and they're not.
No. Well, Sam, people can find you and Braeden at Sorbo, teeth in backwards, sorbostudios.com, as well as finding Braeden, you at your own, BraedenSorbo.com also. You can pick up all the fantastic books, playing cards, and the wall magnet, you name it, all the merchandise you have up there. I'd love to get a copy of your books autographed. Hint, hint, hint.
In the mail.
And I welcome you back anytime. There's so much more to talk about. And Braeden, you're going to be one powerhouse. Don't worry, honey. You're going to be just fine. You're going to be just fine. 40 years from now, you're going to look back at yourself and said, I wouldn't have changed a thing.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, God bless. And thank you for the hard work you both do for everyone.
Thank you,
Take
both
care.
of you.
All right. Check them out. Sorbo Studios. Try to say that 3 times fast. All right. And we are welcoming back to the show someone that we missed for a long time, Carole Lieberman, Dr. Lieberman, who is a psychiatrist as a medical doctor, with a new book out on her website, The Terrorist Therapist. Say that 3 times fast. Called Lions and Tigers and Terrorists. Oh my, it's a book for kids. Carole, how are you doing today?
Pretty well, thank you.
It is a crazy, crazy world. And when you were first on the show, I went back to my records, and God, it was like 4 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So it's been an ongoing relationship over the years, and I'm glad that we can finally see each other face to face in this new format. I'm missing my co-host today, so just please excuse Curtis. But there's so many different things, and I forgot to turn my phone off. So many things to talk about that's going on that's crazy in this world. And I find it funny because even in my own household, turning off the smart devices, and people are disconnecting themselves from society. And the more I see it, the more I remember reading back in, the 1970s, Isaac Asimov's book, I, Robot.
Uh-huh.
And when we see the technology, the AI, and the robots that are coming out in today's society, are we devolving into what Isaac Asimov saw happening all those years ago?
Well, I didn't actually read the book. I heard of it. I hope not. The answer is I hope not. I'm sort of trying not to, I haven't adopted anything yet that is AI. I mean, not on purpose. Obviously, though, now when you Google something to find out information about something, it comes up top of the page, the AI assessment of whatever it is that you're looking up. So you kind of can't hide from it completely. But so far, I have not used, I mean, for example, I'm familiar with some of the uses that are really not good. Like I treat one of my patients is a professor at a university. And he was talking about how students have been trying to answer the finals or, even homework with AI and trying to get away with it, except that then when the teacher gets 2 that are exactly the same, you
gotta figure that out.
And actually another example is a woman who is a journalist, and she put out a query, and she said that she contacts the person back if they try to answer her query, because she wants to make sure that they're not an AI. And she gets answers that are similar, that people just, use AI. And here's a quick way to answer this question. It's really horrible.
Yeah. Well, what I'm finding is because the people are relying on this, they're not reading. They're not actually reading books. And when you do something like that, it activates something in the brain. And you keep your memory better. You've got better cognizance, better understanding, better social skills, because you're actually reading the words and you're feeling whatever the emotion or the thought is that was on the page. But when you use AI and you're getting something in 140 characters or less, you're not learning, you're not growing,
right?
And you're not making connections with society.
Right. And plus, there are ways for AI, of course, to manipulate us, which is an even worse part about it. For example, I had looked up on Google, I had Googled 8647, to try to look into Comey's Instagram and all
You
that.
mean that? You mean that? That?
Oh, right. Yes. There we go.
I'm quick. You know that.
And at first I said that it was like it gave a few things, but one of them was about how in law and police it can be mean murder, or killing. So now today I just looked it up for another reason, and it has a different kind of. It doesn't mention it that way. It changed and it said something about and it attributed that to Merriam-Webster. The dictionary, and now it has something else where it's like explaining. Merriam-Webster says that this has come out. There's a recent use or connotation to this as murder, but it was like hedging. So there's also political aspects to it. Now it doesn't want to admit that it was murder.
No, what gets me, and I'm glad you brought Comey up, is that here he was a prosecutor in the New York State going after the mob. And anyone that lives in the tri-state area, used to work in restaurants and catering and bartending. When you say 86, kill the order. But when you talk about it and you're prosecuting mobsters and you hear them say, well, I want you to 86 this, you take care of the situation. If it's a murder, hey, sorry, little Louis, he's 86, he's out of here. It's a way of saying it without actually saying it. And he knows this as a prosecutor.
Right.
As the head of the FBI, he definitely knows what 86 means. So,
Yeah.
I mean, this is a snow job, and he's trying to get out of the fact probably he had too much of Nancy Pelosi's vodka and thought he was being funny, and it just backfired on him.
Well, he blamed it on his wife somehow. He tried to blame it on his wife. It didn't really make sense. But
I would have loved to be in that bed that night.
Yeah, right.
Well, some of the things that I'm seeing, and what brought me into one of them is I think he may be a colleague of yours, Dr. Stanley Ridgely, who wrote the book Brutal Minds about the dark world of the left wing brainwashing our college kids. But this has been going on, I've said, long before this. Growing up in the generation I did, they first introduced health ed into the school systems.
Uh-huh.
And as a kid, I saw a slippery slope. Oh, we're only going to be talking about medicine and letting you understand the human body. Well, then that devolved into what we see today, where they're teaching kids about transgenderism and sexual acts and things like that.
Yeah.
I saw that back in the 60s and 70s coming into our school system as a kid.
Uh-huh.
Where were the adults in the room?
They were behind it. Yes. This is really, so many teachers, not all teachers, but so many teachers have been taught to become teachers or to use their post as teachers to put forth these political ideas. And I mean, it's awful. Kids don't need to be taught masturbation. That is something that every child figures out for themselves. And certainly they don't need to be taught all these different kinds of sexuality when they're a kid. I mean, this is something that you ultimately figure out if this is something that you're interested in, but it's terrible. I mean, that plus critical race theory, plus, that was mainly, things where kids don't look at other kids by the color of their skin. They don't judge whether they want to be friends with that kid because of the color of their skin. It's if they like the kid or if they're, playing together nicely or whatever. They didn't think about, oh, well, if I'm white, I'm an oppressor. And if they're black, then they are the oppressed. I mean, introducing these ideas to kids in elementary school or any age really is just terrible. It's creating racism.
Well, the kids growing up, they look for a parent figure. They need someone to guide them, to teach them, to let them know. Kids understand, hey, someone, you're taller, you're bigger, you're stronger than me, you know more than me. I'm going to cling to you and I want your attention. I want your love at the same time. And adults have abused that power and privilege. They've taken it away from the natural parents and said, we know better. Society knows better than you as an individual. And in this case, they have their own psychological problems, I could say, but they are now putting them on the child. And the child doesn't understand that. So they're going to say whatever the adult says to say.
Yes. And, really heading towards pedophilia. I mean, that's really what this is, grooming. So it is incredibly, slippery slope down to the worst possible outcome.
What has me now is that they're using this power they have. So now as the child is coming through the school system, they've got poor reading and writing skills, poor arithmetic, poor speech, poor comprehension of social skills. I mean, I had a deacon said he's leading classes of kids who are trying to go get jobs who don't understand how to socially interact with another person. They don't know how to look them in the eye, don't know how to shake the hand, don't know how to articulate clearly what their goals are in life and seeking if those goals would fit into that job you're looking for. They don't understand these social interactions. What they do understand is an adult saying, you're white, you're bad. You're black, you're oppressed, so this person has to kiss your butt. That's what they understand. And that's not how to grow up. So now they're becoming the adults entering society and they can't function. So what do? They're now society's reject. What do they cling to? These sects they have here that now is radical Islam or supporting Hamas and Gaza Strip and saying to the river and sea, not understanding the calling for genocide.
Right.
They're not understanding this. They are now adults and fail to understand the ramifications of the actions they're doing.
Yes. And unfortunately, there are people who are taking advantage of that. I mean, there are people who are doing this on purpose, making sure that the kid, I was reading something about how New York, I'm from New York originally. And so New York students, all the standardized tests, they are doing so poorly in them. And, because they're teaching all these things that aren't really needed, aren't really education. It's just political ideas. And it has to, and people are fighting to not, like, for example, right now with Trump is trying to end these protests at schools and end the anti-Semitism. And they're fighting, like Harvard, for example, is just fighting him every which way. Part of it is, a lot of it has to do with money, because, for example, in colleges, when you get a student who comes from a foreign country, they have to pay more to go to school there than American kids, especially like in California, UCLA. Kids who are from California pay the least. And so they want kids from other states, from other countries, and for the money. And so that is what's happening a lot, as well as Middle East countries giving professorships, funding colleges. So they bring in all these professors who are from the Middle East and who teach terrorism, who teach from the river to the sea and all of that. And the colleges, accept it because they got the money for that professorship.
Well, I've been talking about this a lot, and I've been doing the show now for 15 years. And I've seen a progression where originally when we were talking about something in this bit, we were talking about the funding into colleges by radical groups. We were talking about their care coming into the FBI and other government agencies and instructing people how to behave before someone who is Muslim. They were also teaching the Muslim community how to I can't even say the word, to obscure anything that the police or the FBI are looking for in how to respond. The seeds were being, thank you, that was the word. I'm sorry. I had too many strokes, and sometimes my words just don't come out right. But we saw all these things happening almost 2 decades ago, but now it's become the norm in our society because we allowed it to seep in the back door. And now the question to me is, are we able to now slam that door shut and reverse the damage that's been done?
Well, yes, that is a very important question. In Europe, Europe is almost 100% gone. They've let so many radical Islamists in, migrants in, and they are taking over. I mean, England is ridiculous. Is so upside down. France is so upside down. I went to medical school in Belgium, and
oh, you got a co-host behind you.
yes, I just saw him come into the picture. And he said Belgium. And so I lived in Paris, and I lived in Belgium, and I lived in England, and I have great fondness for those countries. And to see what they have become with this onslaught of radical Islamists who are taking all the money, who are getting a free ride from social services and all that, and who are attacking. Every day there are attacks, terror attacks. We just don't get to hear about it in America. But so in America, with all the people coming in from our borders and all that, there are terrorist cells in America as well. And when 9/11 happened, and I decided to become the terrorist therapist, meaning to help people cope with terror attacks, to help them understand that terrorists are not done, that they do plan to come back and take over. I started that then, and I didn't really know much about terrorism at the beginning, but I learned from some of the best who were studying terrorism for years already. And I'll never forget this, seminars where they would say, speakers would talk about how the goal of the terrorists, it's not necessarily only by doing something violent like 9/11, but it's to seep into the government and the media and education, and to gradually take over these places and teach everybody, to believe in radical Islam, first of all, and just to take over the world, basically, insidiously through these different institutions. And it has certainly come to pass, and it's continuing to come to pass.
I saw a lot of this happening back in the 80s and 90s because I would drive into Brooklyn to go to my precinct, and you'd be driving past a couple of mosques and you see armed men standing outside guarding the mosque. And I didn't know much about Islam, but I got a lot of lessons when the riots that broke out on Utica Avenue in that area in East New York. We were there on the front lines protecting the Hasidic community from the attacks, helping them cross the Brooklyn and the Williamsburg Bridge on their Sabbath. I began to learn being steeped in that, but facing terrorists also prior to that, I used to work in the travel agency. I owned a travel agency in Westbury on Long Island. And I got to see other things that were happening. And I never really delved into it until the attack on the Twin Towers in 93, February 26th, 1993. I remember that day. It was snowing. And I was waiting for surgery on my shoulder. But our guys, we ran out to the towers to help bring people in. But when 9/11 happened, that was when I first learned I actually had PTSD. I didn't know it because I was sitting retired at home. And when I was watching that, I knew what was happening. I knew where they were planting people, where the fire trucks, where the ambulances would be placed. I knew the plaza. And I knew if those towers came down, they would be crushed. And so, people don't understand what we are facing. And this isn't a fight that just came recently. It's been decades in the making, and probably even longer if we go back to Thomas Jefferson buying the Quran to find out who he was fighting. This has been an ongoing fight since the birth of Islam with, I guess, Christianity and Judaism. having read the Quran and faced off in my own local town in South Carolina here, an imam, when I had the Quran in my hand, I says, but sir, you didn't finish the statement about Muslims being friends with the Christians and Jews. You didn't follow through. Before the Prophet Muhammad, meaning before Muhammad was born, it was okay. Now Muhammad is here and you can't.
Mm.
And I got told to shut up and sit down. They don't understand what they're fighting. And we're trying to get the word out. But, this attitude that we see that is being brought to us by this one sect has swept into other areas of our society. Now you have the politically correct, the CRT and everything else is a branch of that. And they've seen the weakness in our society and they're aiming for each area. And if you can't kill the child in the womb before it, then destroy the child so it can never give birth to another generation.
Uh-huh.
And how do you kill society when society cannot reproduce?
Yes. They have a long range plan, 1,000 years they've been planning this, and they've been making amazing strides just in the last, I do a podcast, the Terrorist Therapist Show, and I've been doing it for, let's say, about 8 years or so, since the teens. The acceleration of all of the attacks. And in fact, I was just reading before going on with you, there was an attack in London, in England. They're not calling it an attack yet because it takes a week before they will admit that it's a terrorist attack. But it was a car that rammed into a crowd, a celebration, a victory parade for their soccer team. And so nobody, so far, no terrorism. The word hasn't been used, but that's one of their known ways of committing an attack, because it's a very easy way to commit an attack. You just ram your car. It's what happened in New Orleans on New Year's Day. When the
Boston Marathon, the bombers, we've had it here in New York City. We've seen it all over the place, and yet we fail to admit to what it is. How dare we tell the public the truth?
They try to say that it's just like a car accident or something. A car went out of control or whatever. I mean, we need to stop being in denial before anything can really happen to protect us.
Well, there's so much more we can go on, but I wanted to mention also, just to change the subject a little bit, that you were working with someone that we've had on the show also, Clue Wright, in reference to the Michelle O'Connor murder in Florida.
Oh, yes. I remember. That was ages ago. Yes.
Yes. And I had him on just a couple of weeks back. And as I was doing my research, I found out that you had chimed in on that and came to the same conclusion that everyone else seems to be coming. For those that watched the previous episode with Clue Wright, Michelle O'Connor had been killed, but we're saying by her boyfriend, who was a deputy sheriff. And we looked at the photos and everything, the crime scene, and nothing seemed to make sense. And yet this man has yet to be prosecuted for the murder of this mother of a young child.
It's really awful. I remember that. I'm not sure how I got involved. I think a friend of mine put me in touch with her mother or something like that. And then I started looking at everything. I remember that, first of all, the gun, the trajectory of the bullets did not make sense unless it was someone standing super close to her, right?
Correct.
And he gave this story, and whatever he said seemed to fit with how the trajectory was. And then he took a long time. When the police got there, he didn't come out right away. I mean, I remember all these little pieces come together, and it's really sad that he still hasn't been arrested.
Yeah, because when you mentioned the trajectory of the gun, because it was pointed to the front of her, and as you can see, I had a cervical fusion. So as I was doing my own motions through it, I'm saying, wait a minute, it would have come out back here, not where they claim it came out. But a lot of things were just not adding up, and hopefully we will find justice for that. Another thing that you had been involved in talking about Long Island, New York, Gilgo Beach, with that case. And that's my old stomping grounds, having grown up on Long Island and this going to the South Shore, Jones
I went
Beach
to
and everything
Stony-
like that.
I went to Stony Brook.
Ah, well, I'm a product of Nassau community.
Uh-huh.
And that was when it was just all the outside buildings before they actually built the real campus, the old military housing. But we look back at this guy, Rex. I'm trying to pronounce his last name. Hierman.
I pronounce it
Hierman. Hierman. I'm half German. I can't pronounce it. But I remember hearing the stories about these women that were disappearing in the Gilgo Beach area.
Uh-huh.
And before I retired and moved at that point when things started to build up, but they finally did catch him. And you had mentioned that the reason why this guy was able to do what he did between 1996 all the way up to, I believe it was 2021 with these women, I think it was a total of 7, was horrific. But you said because he was an architect, that training taught him how to cover his trail. How does that fit?
Taught him how to be very obsessive compulsive about details. And in fact, he made it, they eventually found in his house, in his basement, paper on his computer, because they didn't find this right away, but they eventually found these, like a journal that he was creating. And it had all these details of things to do and not to do, because this doesn't work. You know, this is good for hiding your tracks. And so because he was an architect, architects have to be super obsessive compulsive, have to be really good with details. And before they can make these plans, it was basically a plan, like an architect's plan for how to go about killing them, burying them, all of that. So yes, that's how. Plus, it helped that he picked working sex workers, so who often don't really have a close family and don't notice or don't report that they're missing. And he picked girls who were smaller than he was. He's a big guy, you know. He was very tall and very big, and he was teaching himself all these, you know, things to do and not to do to try not to get caught. But it lasted only so long.
You know, growing up on Long Island, you always heard about the mob. And when they started finding the bodies, everyone was saying it's mob hits. But instead, it was, in fact, a serial killer who is being prosecuted and awaiting trial at this point. Thank God that they finally added this all up. But unfortunately, 7 women lost their lives needlessly.
Excuse me. And it's interesting. I think that they're going to find that his wife, who's this very strange woman, was involved. You know, that she, at the very least, that she knew something about this, because you know, they think that maybe he killed some of them in the house, or at least one of them in the house, and they found some DNA from her, or a hair, which of course would have DNA in it, from her, also the daughter. And you know, he was obsessed with looking up torture killings online, and his daughter, they found, she had a whole history, you know, on her computer or phone or whatever, her digital things. She was looking up torture porn too. So I don't think we know everything yet about his life and all these details.
Well, you know, we're finding ourselves in a society, especially with the high tech we have, where people that live on the fringe of society, they don't have a lot of friends, they don't have a lot of social contact. We're starting to see people act out their fantasies, and they have actually no impulse control at this point, because they haven't been able to interact with society because they're stuck in technology.
Yeah.
How many times you go to a restaurant and you see everyone sitting there, everyone's staring at their smart device, and no one's having a conversation? Unless we can bring society back to personal interaction, looking at each other and actually having a conversation, we got big problems.
Yes, it's so sad to see like families or couples or they're with each other at a table and they're not talking to each other. They're just looking at their phones. It's really, parents should not let their kids do that. Should at the very least they should not let their kids have their phones or use their phones during mealtime, and not to take it in with them when they go to sleep. Parents these days, parents want to be friends instead of parents. So they don't want to say no to their little darlings.
Well, what one hope I see is that here in our state, they passed a resolution or legislation, I forget which, allowing the schools to say no phones in the classroom.
Yes, that's finally, that's really important. I mean, it was like a no-brainer. They should never have allowed them in to begin with. What kid is going to prefer? It's going to be very few teachers. I shouldn't say this, but not enough teachers, let's put it that way. Not enough teachers are so compelling, so interesting, or they teach their subject in such an interesting way that they're going to have the child pay more attention to them than their phone, because in their phone, they can look up all kinds of things. Mainly they're looking up to see whether they got likes on Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm glad also we're changing our Department of Education here federally and allowing the states to go back to controlling their own education. We'll still see states like New Jersey that don't require certification for teachers any longer, which I think is a bad thing.
Really? What?
Yeah, New Jersey did that last year. Yeah, last year they no longer need certification to be teacher in the classroom. But you're always going to have those really, really liberal states.
Wow.
But you have other states that are starting to get back to the basics, because here we have it where you must teach the founding principles and the founding documents. So I think we're going to see a change. I think parents with the pandemic, seeing what was being taught in the classroom, are looking more for a traditional education system. When we can't, and when we're sitting out of the nation, the worldwide in education, where we used to be the top 5, we're now in the bottom. And when Chicago has, I believe it was 32 school districts that none of them graduated at their grade reading level or writing or math level. No, I think parents are seeing this and saying, let's get back to the basics and stop the BS.
Yes, it is. Boy, you don't even need a certificate. I mean, I could see that, like if you were an art teacher and you had an art following, you were obviously a very well-known good artist. You don't necessarily have to go to school to be a teacher, but there are rare kinds of things, math and English and history. There are certain basic things that you really should prove that you know and that you can teach.
Well, I still run a tea party, believe it or not, for 16 years. And I had our school board chair come in, a retired Air Force colonel, and we were all questioning him, why do we have disciplinary problems? And one of the problems we're finding is lack of male teachers. Lack of male leadership. And that's what we need to be, where we can show that even women and men can both interact and still create education and bring out a healthy child into society. Yes. And I think that the male figure is what is really the big problem here.
Yes, I think that's a good point. And, that teaching became less attractive to little boys. I guess, it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the fewer male teachers you have, the fewer male role models the little boys have for, maybe I could be a teacher, they don't see that. But yes,
or a coach or a science instructor, the male figure, even girls need to have a male figure in their life, a masculine male figure. But society has emasculated the male. Yes. And I think we're also, what I'm seeing now in the voting that we've seen with Donald Trump, a lot of young men, 18 to 26, are turning to say, hey, wait a minute, I am a man. And they're heading towards Donald Trump.
Yes, there does seem to be this change afoot. And I blame, the whole feminist movement is ridiculous. It's one thing to get equal pay, and equal opportunities, but it's another thing to make men feel emasculated, castrated.
Yeah, just mandating someone that put into that job simply because of their gender or their chosen gender is not the right thing. We need to meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
And not this. I deserve it because I feel like I'm one of the outsiders. So you got to put me in.
Yes.
You know, you have to have a what do they call it? The word diversity. I'm sorry. If you're the brain surgeon, I want the most skilled brain surgeon working on me.
Exactly. Yes, medical schools have gotten so bad. It's really worrisome as far as who doctors are these days. Because not only what?
I'm sorry, we did a show on that one day too.
Oh, good. First of all, because insurance companies in America have gotten worse and worse as far as the reimbursement that they give doctors for various things. So, like, they don't pay doctors to sit and talk to patients, like they used to, whether it's a psychiatrist or whether it's a family doctor. You have to do something. You have to be doing something all the time. And of course, when a psychiatrist sits and talks, they are doing something, they are doing therapy. I'm not just sitting there listening to a conversation, but because all different specialties, because the payment has gotten so low, doctors are retiring early, they're leaving medicine. And so we have a shortage. And so what does America do? We are importing a lot of doctors from foreign countries. Now, there are some foreign countries, like where I learned medicine in Belgium or in France and England, and all, you get very good education. But in schools in Pakistan, for example, that isn't the greatest education. And so we have, as I was going through internship and residency and starting practice and all that, I saw more and more foreign doctors coming here who really do not have a good fundamental education, and now there are more, and now also, not just now, but medical schools have DEI. They've been holding, admitting based upon. In fact, do you know there was a story about how this was especially the Ivy Leagues. They're not really looking so much at your grades in college or your your test scores, the standardized test scores. They're looking at, or they're including in what they look at, how much social justice volunteer work you've done. Now, and they are taking time from medical school to teach DEI and to teach just all different kinds of social justice topics, rather than how to take out an appendix. It's like really dangerous to go to a doctor these days, especially at UCLA, where there was a story not that long ago about the orientation at UCLA, where they had one of the key leaders doing orientation for medical students, first-year medical students, was this woman. I don't remember her name, but she was giving like this whole day seminar on basically DEI stuff, woke stuff, and anti-Semitic stuff. And after I was graduated from a psychiatry residency at NYU Bellevue, but then I came to California and I took a master's in public health at UCLA. And I also was on the clinical faculty at UCLA. So I spent a lot of time at UCLA. And so it really is disappointing that they have become, they didn't get quite as much press as Harvard, but it's the same thing that's going on at UCLA, if not worse.
Yeah, it is terrible. And blissfully, I've been able to get good doctors. But after a while, they leave private practice and they'll become part of a corporation, a hospital corporation, a medical corporation. And you see them springing up left and right. And now they're on a time schedule and everything has to be just filled in all the little boxes. So it's very rare for you to be able to have your doctor sit down and do a one-on-one full conversation with you.
Yes.
Because sometimes you're there for one problem, but as he's talking to you, you'll realize there's something else going on.
Yes, that's
And
taking
they're
a
not teaching that.
that's taking doing a full history and physical. You have to ask about all different parts of the body when a patient comes in, not just what they come complaining of, but because you have to figure out, let's say they have a stomach ache. Well, it could be due to a million different things, and you have to ask about all these different other organs, other systems of the body in order to find out any kind of problem. It's not just, there's so many different things that could cause certain symptoms, and you can't find out the cause without going through all of this. Same thing with a good physical exam. Ever since COVID, now doctors are doing these Zoom exams. So it's just... It's you can't get sick these days. You have to be really careful not to get sick.
No, what I do, I'm glad I have been able to find, because my mother lives with me. She's a stroke victim. She'll be 93 July 4th. And, dealing with this sort of a situation, you've got a whole generation of us coming in where now we're all older.
Mm-hmm.
The young kids we don't have as many as we should. We're not giving enough of a birth rate. So now we're finding ourselves in this situation where we're an older society dealing with things that we never thought we'd have to deal with before.
Mm-hmm.
You used to have large family units, and when something happens like this, everyone gathers around and the whole family coheses, and everyone helps everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
In today's society, when something like this happens, you're on your own. And I'm learning a lot of things the hard way, because I had to call the local EMS to help get her up off the floor last night.
Uh-huh.
So as we go through society, we're going to be finding this, and that's going to be a whole nother world for you to delve into.
Yes. Well, that's why I say everybody should be doing things now to keep themselves healthy.
And that's why one of the things I am always saying, go and get a book and sit down and read. Disconnect from the smart devices. Find a local senior center and get them to take you over there, and you can then have interactions with other people. There are things like that are out there. But we've got an older society, and this is going to be a whole new set of patients for us to look at. Well, Dr. Carole, it has been so much of a pleasure. And I'm sorry your co-host disappeared again, because mine's sitting on the chair on the other side. I've got a little kitty cat.
Yeah, it's
funny. I call her Puppy because she's my little puppy. It's not a kitten. She's a puppy. Anyway, it has been a pleasure. Your book, the new one that's out, that's on your website, which is theterroristtherapist.com. They can get all your articles, and the book, Lions and Tigers and Terrorists. Oh, my. Parents, pick that up and take a look at it and read it to your kids.
Thank you.
God bless. All right. That was absolutely fantastic.